And Icelandic is not a super common language to study, I would imagine. So is it
No,
hard to come by resources?
it's much better now. A lot of, and I think there's different reasons for it. So there's a lot of foreigners who live in Iceland who want to learn or have learned, and they're using their resources and ways to kind of help with that. And then there are Icelanders who live here who want to help preserve the language, so they're trying to do things. So whether it's having, Icelandic and subtitles on Disney Plus or Netflix, or having more programs on TV just in general that are in Icelandic, um, courses. There's a lot of courses, and like the unions pay for some of it. Apps that are coming up. So there's one called Link. I don't know if you know about that app.
Yeah, that's Steve Kaufman. Is that
Yeah.
his? Yeah.
So for Icelandic, currently it's free. And there's a guy here named Rökkvi who is very passionate about helping to preserve Icelandic. He speaks like 8 languages or something. And so he was like, he's been uploading a ton of resources and negotiating with different people who like written books or whatever to get like samples of that stuff on Link, because it is such a small there's such a small population of people who end up, learning the language or speak it, that Link was like, okay, we'll make it for free, but we don't have a dedicated team on it. So Rökkvi is just a volunteer from Iceland who's doing all this stuff. So that's a great resource though, because you can get all of the listening in, and then you can like practice words and stuff. There's a new there's a new app called Tweak that just came out. It's like a 3-month program, and it's supposed to be really interactive. I'm actually going to try it out just because I think it's really interesting myself just to see like what's out there. So it's increasing for sure, but nothing along the lines of like, for English, definitely not like bigger language, Spanish, Chinese, like Mandarin. Like you're not going to find those types of resources or even the amount of people that you could talk to. But Icelandic is doing its best.
What do you think the hardest part of the language is to learn
The grammar,
as an English speaker?
the grammar,
Okay. The grammar's
because
pretty complicated.
yes. So if you speak German, for instance, if you're familiar with German grammar, Icelandic first of all is an I think it's a North Germanic language or something. So if you speak German and you know that grammatic layout of like declensions, and there's 4 different like ways that you
Cases.
can cases exactly, then you'll be at least familiar with Icelandic grammar. Now, it doesn't make it necessarily super easy for you. I know Germans who have still had issues with remembering how to decline properly, or how to use these cases properly, or even like the gender of a word or something, because it's different than German. But that part for English speakers, we don't have that, right? It's not a part of our language. And so wrapping your brain around the fact that one word might have like 30 different ways in which you could use it is like, why? Why is that even necessary? Like,
Right.
and it's a very demoralizing thing if you try to take it all in. And if you try to only focus on grammar, you end up feeling like you're never going to learn it because there's so many parts to it. But often it's better just to take it from what are you interested in? Learn to talk about those things and then keep expanding out, right? Like you don't have to be a grammar nerd in a grammar book continuously doing rote examples, because that is boring and most people do not find motivation out of that. Now, there are people who are, linguistic nerds and they love that stuff, but the majority of us like to watch something or read something of interest to us, and that's how we learn, like we delve into something that can keep our attention. So, yeah, that's by far the grammar. I have pronunciation for a lot of people could be hard. I have been very fortunate for me that that's like worked out pretty well.
Yeah, there can be, I think, a kind of paralysis by analysis when it comes to grammatically complex languages where you just want to be perfect. You want to speak it perfectly, and it gets in the way of you speaking at all because you're like, well, what's the ending for that? And like the case system, I only know it from the German side of it, but it changes the articles. The definite and indefinite
Yeah.
articles will change based on the case. And so then the cases all represent a function in a sentence. And so you have the accusative case
Mhm.
if the item is receiving the action.
Yes.
And then, the article before that will change. The adjective ending will change. Pronouns will change. And there's the dative case, which is the indirect recipient of the action. There's the nominative case, which is the subject form. There's it gets really heavy really quick.
Yes.
And yeah, one sentence can be, using a bunch of these different endings, and it's often confusing on which ones you're supposed to use and when. And so, yeah, that's definitely heavy. Are there also 4 cases in
Yes.
Icelandic?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
So I was just like, no. I remember when I first took a class, like my first year, again, like I came in guns blazing, right? Like working a full-time job. And I think by the end of the summer in August, I decided I was going to take a 6-week intense Icelandic class after work. So it was like working full time and then a 3-hour class, like 2 or 3 times a week. I almost burnt out. Okay. I was like, I don't want to even look at this language. Like, I'm so tired because I
Yeah.
was also at work and we'd have work meetings in Icelandic, not the ones that specifically had to do with me, but like if we were all having a company wide meeting, they were in Icelandic because the majority of people speak Icelandic. And I remember going to this and being like, oh my God, just like my eyes glazing over, like everything was just like, oh my God, I
Hmm.
can't do this. Like, this is, I'm
Mm.
going to sit here, but I'm now just blocking out everything because none of it makes sense to me. It's all coming in too soon. So like taking a course to me was like, this is the way to do it. But I also can get very overzealous and just take on a little bit too much. And I learned that the hard way. So
I mean, that's overwhelming, I think, for anybody moving to a different country where they speak a different language, because like the culture shock or the cultural integration is one thing in and of itself, but then when you put the language on top of it, it gets so much heavier.
Mhm.
Like I lived in Colombia for 9 months. That's where my
Mm.
girlfriend is from.
Mhm.
And so I was living my life there basically in Spanish. It's just like at the end of the day, you just feel mentally exhausted. Like
Mhm.
you can't take in anymore because it gets really tiring. And it's something that you can't really get away from if you're living in that environment either. Like my girlfriend speaks English, but no one else did. And so
Mm. That
the,
changes everything.
yeah, so like everything was in Spanish. And so sometimes I would be in those social interactions where, I mean, I've had a long day of just, Spanish, Spanish, Spanish. I'm at like a birthday party or something and people are talking to me and I'm just like, I'm not there. Like, I'm just blank. I'm just like,
Yeah.
yep, sure. Yeah, you
Mhm. Like,
bet. I
see, see,
agree.
see, see.
Sí, sí, estoy de acuerdo. Estoy de acuerdo. Sí,
And
sí.
they're like, "That's not a yes or no question." You're like, "See,
Yeah,
I
you're
don't
like,
care."
whatever. I can't do anymore. This is my limit. And so
Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting because I never got to that place, here in Canada. But when you go to a different country, especially with a different language, it feels like it's overwhelming in a way that I hadn't experienced before, I guess.
Mhm.